All right, looks like we are live and good to go. Let's jump over here and make sure that it is coming through. Zach, as like you usually do, if you could just check on your phone or something, make sure everything's cool. Yes, that looks like a good deal to me.
Told the old lady to get on there tonight.
Good, I hope she does. That would be really cool. All right, put that on mute. All right, what's up? How you guys doing out there? I know it's been a long time, been 2 weeks. You've had 2 weeks off of not having to listen to me ramble on, but that is over. We're back. So I hope everybody enjoyed the time they had off. I know I did. Zach? Microphone? Yeah, I saw that. Very good. Thank you. All right, cool deal. Can you hear me better now? As we always do, we'll give them a few minutes for them to log on Facebook here, but I appreciate you guys for showing up in person. You know I'd rather do this in front of people anyway. So all you guys out there on Facebook, you need to come here and visit us live and in person. That would be really awesome. Well, cool deal. Well, I hope everybody did fun stuff the last 2 weeks. I know I did. I went camping 2 weeks ago and then went racing last weekend, so that was a whole lot of fun. That's actually where this picture was taken. It was on our way out to Virginia to go autocross the E36. And that was a really good time. So if you ever get a chance to come out with us, I highly recommend you do it. But anyway, let's get on with the lesson tonight. I called this one Purpose Built. I've got a lot of slides on this one. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them, but we're gonna try. Might just have to talk faster than I usually do. Yeah. And I am going to go ahead and throw up a comment right here. Let's see. There we go. I think that worked. All right, you guys out there online, let me know. Let me make sure you guys can hear me and see me and everything. I think we're good with the microphone and everything now. So just let me know if you can't hear me. All right, cool deal. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I think everybody in this room has already heard of our CARS program that we kicked off last week, and we're going to be continuing to talk about for the next couple of weeks. But more importantly, is our event coming up next Sunday on the 8th, November 8th, Sunday at 2 o'clock. We're having our CARS program fundraiser cruise in. And you guys might have seen a video that Miss Stephanie put out earlier this week, and I've been sharing everywhere I can possibly share, and I appreciate you guys that have shared that as well. But I want to take a minute and kind of talk about this and what we're doing. So you probably heard in the last video that we have kicked off our CARS program, which is a program that we're going to use to help repair or replace cars for people in need in the church and in the community. Well, we need your help to do that, obviously. So tomorrow, or next week, November the 8th, we're having our cruise in. If you've got an import, a muscle car, a truck, a motorcycle, whatever it is, we want you to come on out. There's no entry fee. Bring it out. We'll line them all up like you see here. We're going to be doing food. We'll have hot dogs, chips, and drinks. We're going to be doing some games, and more importantly, we're going to be doing some raffles where we're giving away some really great prizes. And there we go. Great prizes from our sponsors. Now, you guys probably seen this card already. I know everybody in the room here already has. But if you haven't, we've got some great sponsors on board, DIYAutotune.com, East Coast Speed Shop, Speedworks, and Gold City Tires, of course. And, if you got a company out there and you want to help us out, just contact me here on Facebook or shoot me an email, and I would love to get you on board. But what it says right here is Tanglewood Church's Fueled by Faith CARS program is dedicated to sharing our God-given time, talent, and resources to bless our community. Our vision is to not only provide faith-centered education through our ongoing Christ-centered car clinics, that's what you guys are in right now, both virtually and in person. Virtually, that's what you guys are on right now. And but to take action to help when a need is present. As a group, the CARS program aims to provide no-cost or low-cost automotive maintenance and repairs to individuals or families that may not otherwise be in a position to do so. And our banner verse for this program is Colossians 3:17. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. So I felt like that really kind of summed up what we're trying to do here. But again, we would love it if you guys would come and hang out with us. We'll be taking donations, and there will be some really cool cars out there. And we hope to see all of you guys out there next week, November 8th, right here at Tanglewood at 2 o'clock. Cool. Now, with the housekeeping out of the way, we can get into our lesson. So I titled this one Purpose Built, if you didn't see that in the beginning there. And, what you're going to see how this ties in a second, I hope. I've got a slide that kind of, sums it all up, but hopefully you'll see how these 4 verses will tie into our purpose-built theme tonight. The first one being Ephesians 2:10. So, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And I really like this verse because not only is it saying that we're God's handiwork, we've probably all heard that before, but what I really like is that we have been created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And that's the part that I really like. It's saying that all these things that we've had the opportunity to do, all these chances that we've been given, all that was planned in advance, which is kind of hard to get your head around, I think to some degree. But it is really interesting to think that God has already prepared all of this in advance, since the beginning, which I just think is kind of really neat. But anyway, keep that in mind. We're God's handiwork. The next one is 1 Thessalonians. And make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you not be dependent on anyone. Now, I think that's a verse for the times, right? Yeah. I mean, this is straight out of the Bible. Mind your own business. And so, that's kind of hard to argue with.
That just says mind your own business.
First Thessalonians. Yeah, I like that. That actually would be pretty cool. Mind your own business. 1 Thessalonians. But what I also like, because we're all car guys here, and a lot of you guys out there are car guys, mechanics, or whatever the case. It says you should lead a quiet life, and you should mind your own business, but also you should work with your hands. So I think that really speaks to me as a mechanic. Maybe I kind of wish that maybe they didn't want us to work so hard. But I don't know. I don't know if Paul had mechanics in mind when he wrote this. But I also like right here is that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and that you not be dependent on anybody. I think both of those are really good points. I mean, obviously we want to set a good example. You've heard before that we're the body of Christ, and we need to be able to show that when we're out in public or with whatever we do. But also that you not be dependent on anybody, which I also really like. So I think there's a lot in there that we could take to heart. Especially, again, like I said, we're talking about being purpose-built. So then we got Romans 8, 28, and 29. This one I like as well. And I think this is one that everybody in here is probably familiar with. But if you're not familiar with it out there, this is another really good one to take to heart. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And I know that's kind of like some complicated Bible language going on there. But the reason that I really like this is because, the one that everybody likes to use. In all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. But most people stop right there. Most people's like, God uses all things. Well, God works all things for the good of those who love Him, which is true. But I also like who have been called according to His purpose. So no matter where you find yourself, you're where God wants you to be for His purpose. You're being, He's using you for His purpose. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes, I think. I think we all kind of want to take matters into our own hands and put ourselves into a different position, or try to do things, try to kind of skip over a few steps. But I think if we could take that to heart and realize that we are where God wants us for the purpose that He has for us, things, you can be a lot more content in that. I think it's a lot easier to just kind of sit back and say, okay, well, this is where I'm supposed to be right now, and so I'm going to try and work to represent God the best I can. And obviously, we don't know what He's got planned for us. He even says right here is that for those God foreknew, He also predestined. So, He's already got that all handled. So there's a lot of solace to be taken in that. So even if you're in a tight spot right now, you're where God wants you to be. So make the best of it. Which is easier said than done, I think. But, if the Bible were easy, I guess in some ways it is. In a lot of ways it's, love your neighbor as yourself, love God first, and mind your own business, obviously. Those 3 things right there, I think you'd be pretty well covered. But again, we don't make it that easy. Deuteronomy, I think I said that wrong. There we go. 31:8. This one I also like. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. And again, we're talking about, being purpose-built, and we're talking about being, God has a plan for us and that we are his handiwork. And this is just another really good encouragement saying that through all that, he's promised not to leave us and not to forsake us. And again, that kind of goes back to, if you're in a tight spot, if you're in a place in your life that, maybe you feel like isn't where you need to be, just remember that he's still there. I mean, he's made a promise to us that he will not leave us and will not forsake us. So what's the next word? Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. And again, this is one of those easier said than done kind of things, I think. Especially for me, I think men in general kind of have a problem letting go and just kind of trusting God to things will work out the way that he wants them to do. So we always kind of try to take matters into our own hands and solve problems, our way in our time. But that's not the best move. In fact, it's not a good move at all. So what we need to do is just remember that he won't leave us, he won't forsake us, and we need to not be afraid or discouraged. And so the way that these all tie in, here we go. Let me make sure that these guys can see it online there. So the way these all tie in, we were all created uniquely by God. We can agree with that? Yes? Okay. We all have a purpose. We agree there? Everybody listening to me right now has a purpose. Trust me. We all have work to be done. I think that, come on, you got to give me that one. I was going to say, I've got plenty of work to be done in a lot of ways. But we were all created uniquely. We all have a purpose. We all have work to be done. And God uses all things, and I highlighted all things for the good. And God will never leave us alone. So in those verses that I just shared, I think it's pretty safe to say that these are all true statements, right? You guys agree? You guys agree online? I hope so. So that's kind of how we tied this in tonight. That's where my verses kind of tied into what we're talking about. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into tonight's lesson. Purpose-built, oils and fluids first. Knock the TV over. So when we're talking about oils and fluids, what comes to mind right off the bat?
Oils and fluids.
Yeah, oils and fluids. Yeah, that's real creative. Yeah, lubricant. So we're obviously engine oil is probably one of the first things that comes to mind. But there's a lot of different oils and fluids in a car, and all of these can be purpose-built or purpose-designed depending on what you're doing. And that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. So tonight will be a lot of simple concepts like oils and fluids, but then we'll talk about how they can be purposely engineered or purposely chosen to get done what you're trying to get done, to serve your purpose, as it were. So oils and fluids, we've got several different ones here. So more than just engine oil, obviously. We've got engine oil, we've got coolant, brake fluid, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, and fuel, of course, is an oil or fluid. All of these are typically petroleum-based in some way. But we've got several different things that we want to look for in each one of these, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. When we're got several different categories. Obviously, we're just going to spend a little time on each one. But when we're talking about engine oil, what kind of choices do we have? We've got conventional or synthetic. You've got different weights. With coolant, we want to choose coolant with the proper heat transfer properties, lubrication properties, and corrosion properties, and we want increased boiling point, or we want to get a boiling point that we're happy with. So coolant, there's very many choices there. Brake fluid, again, brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture. Zach pointed out that I spelled that wrong last time, so I went back and fixed it. And we want to choose brake fluid based on its ability to dissipate heat and how much heat that it can absorb. Transmission fluid is the same thing. Not all transmission fluid is created equal. They got high detergent. We need something that can withstand high hydraulic pressures, and obviously friction modification depending on the transmission and the type of clutches and things that we have in there. Power steering, again, that one kind of gets overlooked a lot. Anybody ever been to the dealer or been to the somewhere that services your car, and they recommend a power steering service? Anybody ever had that recommended? most people overlook that. They're like, you're just trying to sell me something or whatever, and fine, there might be some of that to it. But this is a fluid that gets very much overlooked, and it gets very hot, and it's obviously very important because it's steering. I mean, I think that would be second in importance right behind brakes. Having a steering and no brakes and no steering is kind of equally bad. But that is one that does get overlooked a lot. And so, you definitely want to pick fluids that have anti-foaming agents, and we want to worry about pump lubrication. That's why it's very important to pick the right kind of fluid. Some of them are mineral oil, some of them are ATF. Sometimes they have, they're very specialized in their power steering fluids. But you don't want to overlook that. It's not something you have to change as often as you do your engine oil. But you do want to do that, periodically. Every 15,000 or so would probably be a good deal. Most modern cars are all electric power steering now. So it's not something you really have to worry about as much as you used to. But if you drive a Ford and you start it up cold, you probably hear it. They're pretty famous for that. And then fuel, of course, is another fluid. And then, everybody loves my favorite thing about fuel. What is it, Drew?
Tier 1 gas.
Yeah, that's right, Tier 1 gasoline. And we're going to talk about that a little later, too, because I found some new information on that. No distracting me. So we actually want to pick fuel with decarbonization characteristics, high detergent fuel, lubricity, believe it or not, because, especially with modern cars and direct injection, we need lubricity for those high pressure injectors. Controlled burn rate, so that's going to be in the octane of the fuel, and anti-corrosion properties, especially with modern ethanol fuel. Obviously, it's hygroscopic as well. I see you. And, ethanol or any kind of alcohol absorbs moisture, and so we want to try and fight corrosion in the fuel system. All the aluminum components, steel components, anything in there that can corrode, we want to try and keep that to a minimum. Let's talk about oil first. We're going to spend a couple slides on oil. We're not going to go over each and every one of these one by one. I just picked out a few of them that I thought, might make the most sense and might be able to help the most people out. Understanding oil viscosity or weight. Without reading this, let me block it real quick. What does the W stand for in oil? Like 5W30 or 10W40. Watts. Not you. So the W stands for winter, believe it or not. And when we're talking about viscosity, we're talking about the flow rate. And the best way to describe that is how thick the oil is. Now, they use the term flow rate in SAE measuring, but picture like syrup would have really high viscosity. It'd be very thick. It would have a very low flow rate, right? I mean, you heat it up in the microwave and, it becomes less viscous. So oil is very similar to that. The SAE standard testing for oil or flow rate is measured at 210 degrees Fahrenheit. The higher the number, the more slowly the oil flows at temperature, or thicker the oil can be considered. And one thing to keep in mind here is that these, when you typically look at a bottle of oil and it's 10W30, 10W40, or 30 weight or whatever it is, they're usually talking about ambient temperature. They're usually talking about the way the oil starts out. All oil will thin out when it gets hotter, but we want oil that's going to thin out less or more depending on our application. So this is another one of those areas where being chosen to the certain purpose is really important. Multi-weight oils have varying viscosities depending on temperature. The W between the weights stands for winter, and these oils are very thin or have a low viscosity when cold and provide a higher viscosity when hot. Now, why would you want that? Why would you want it to be thinner when it's cold and thicker when it's hot? The reason is, nobody's going to say anything? Anybody out there? No? Anybody? The reason is because when it's cold, if you had a standard, say 30 weight oil, it would be very, very thick when it's cold. And you wouldn't have enough lubrication, you wouldn't have enough protection when you first started up. It would be like trying to pump syrup through the engine. So these multi-weight oils are thin when they're cold, and then they thicken up when they're warm. You see what I'm saying there? So you end up with it's thin enough that it flows when it's cold, and you can actually get it pumped up through the engine, and everything is protected and everything is coated. And then as it warms up, you want it to maintain a certain viscosity when it's hot so that it doesn't thin out too much, and you lose protection in that way. So if you used a straight 30-weight oil, such as a SAE 30, the oil would be too thick when cold to provide adequate protection on startup, and would likely be too thin for wear protection when it was hot. So that's where you get that multi-weight oil, that 10W30, 5W30, 0W20, whatever it is. This was a pretty cool graphic I found
That
online.
would, be more in, for like, not so much down here because of the temperature wise.
Right.
But like up north. As
Yeah,
far as,
and I was just getting ready to say that. So here is kind of an interesting climate because our climate doesn't swing radically. I mean, we do get really hot days and we do get really cold days, but it's not somewhere where you're going from, 110 degrees to 0 degrees. I guess in some cases you do. But what you're going to see in the next slide is there's actually a temperature chart for ambient temperature, and you'll see how they kind of stack up around right where we live. It's kind of interesting. So in that case, what you're typically looking at more of is more about engine clearance. You want to make sure you have something thick enough to take up the clearance or thin enough to actually fit through the passages, depending on what kind of car it is. And then obviously, temperature of the engine, how you're using it. Are you mud pulling or, is it a rock crawler or autocross car or whatever the case. But the next slide actually addresses that exactly. This little graphic here I found online, which I thought was pretty neat. It shows 9 ways that oil and additives actually work in your engine. I thought this was pretty cool. And Drew, I would pay very close attention to this if I were you. So number 1 is it creates protection. Oil creates a thin lubricating film between moving metal surfaces. I think we all kind of got that one. Number 2 is it reduces buildup. Oil reduces the buildup of sludge and deposits, so it's actually got a detergent factor a lot of times. It captures grime. Oil captures the contaminants like dirt, sludge, and metal particles before the filter. So oil actually has a chemical makeup that allows it to grab onto dirt and contaminants and actually hold on to them. It transfers heat. This is one that a lot of people, I think, overlook as well. Oil transfers heat from the engine to the cooling system. So actually, the oil hitting the metal parts will actually absorb heat, and then that will be transferred to the cooling system in other parts of the engine. Some cars actually have an external oil cooler or, have an oil cooler making it to the cooling system, but it is very important in heat transfer. Prevents corrosion. I think that's a pretty good one. You leave a wrench out in the yard, it gets all rusty. You oil it up and leave it out in the yard, it doesn't. So we don't want any corrosion inside the engine either. And a lot of people don't realize too how much condensation can build up inside an engine. If you ever taken your oil cap off and you've seen that white kind of sludgy looking stuff in there, that's condensation because the engine gets all hot, and then as it cools down, it pulls fresh air in and it condensates, and you end up with moisture and stuff inside the engine. Well, that can, obviously most of the engine is made out of metal, and so that can corrode with that moisture. Improve economy. Oils improve fuel economy by decreasing friction on moving parts. They can actually have a huge impact on fuel economy, which is why all modern cars are going to like 0W20 and 0W16, and these are very, very, very thin oils because they're trying to get as much fuel economy as they can out of these things.
Fuel economy would probably be really bad if you don't have any.
Yeah. It'd probably be really good for a little. You can put any oil in it at all. It'd probably be really good for a little bit. Reduces foam. Foam is a big problem with oil also, and that's another overlooked one, I think. They have additives that help oil flow more freely by reducing the volume of foaming. The reason you don't want foam is because obviously if you have foam, now you've got air, the oil becomes aerated, and so you don't have a film protecting the metal surfaces, you've got air between the metal surfaces. So you want to cut down on that as much as you can. Condition seals, oil condition seals in engine assemblies. Obviously you want to keep those seals soft, especially if the car sits for a long time. You don't want them to get all hard and brittle and obviously leak. And then maintain viscosity, which is what we just talked about. Additives help keep oil at the proper viscosity for the whatever temperature it's operating at. And this is the slide that I was talking with David about. So engine oil is recommended in relation with outside temperature, so this would be ambient temperature. And I could not find one of these that I liked that was in Fahrenheit, so you just have to bear with me that 40, 45, 50 degrees Celsius is very, very hot. You just have to go with me on that one.
To 12, and 50 degrees would be around 105, 106.
Okay, well good, I'm glad you said that.
And then 0 is around 32.
Yeah, that's around 32 Fahrenheit, and then this would be a little over 100. So where we live here in North Carolina, what would you say? We kind of hang out in the 30 to 100 degree range, I mean, it gets, yeah, I don't know. It gets a little colder than 30 sometimes. So, yeah. So what would 30, you said 32 would be about
32
zero.
is 0 for
Yeah.
Celsius.
So around in our climate, 0 degrees probably on the lower end, and then obviously it gets very, very hot here in the summertime. And so you see these ones are going out over 100 degrees. So around here, the 10W30, that's a little thin for what we deal with. 1040 is moving in the right direction. Obviously, you get down here into the synthetic based stuff, and it's got a little bit better protection on the cold end and the hot end. 1040, is looking really good right there. But this is just a really cool illustration of how narrow some of these operating ranges can be with these oils. You see, these are straight SAE weights right here, which I don't even know if anybody uses anymore. Maybe in lawnmowers and things like that.
But if we look at like 1540,
Yeah.
15W40,
Yeah, this is a 1540 mineral base, so this is like a conventional oil.
so the 15W is thinner when it's cold.
Yeah, so the 15 would be thinner cold than, say, well, let's see here. Well, now, I mean, that's the thinnest cold one we've got. Oh, there you go. There's a 10W. So, yeah, the 15W.
530 down there.
Oh, there's a 5. Okay, cool. Yeah, and you see the 5, maintains its viscosity way colder. Yeah, 030, Toyota, Honda stuff, 020, 030. They got 016 out now, too. Stuff's like Crisco, man. Sketches me out. But the engines are built with really, really tight tolerances. So, I guess that's
You can run with no oil and you'll be just fine.
0W16 is just about no oil. My microphone cord is bugging me out. But anyway, does this kind of answer your question on what we were talking about as far as climate goes? It's just kind of really interesting. 1060, isn't this what we put in your car?
No, I put, it
Been that long you put oil in it?
was,
No,
that's the funny part.
that's the funny part. In the last 900 miles, it's had 16 quarts in it.
Yeah, couple oil changes.
Yeah,
I think I put, full synthetic 2050.
maybe it was 2050. And yeah, you can see the semi-synthetic 2060. That's a really good protection down to negative 15 Celsius. And the 1540 is pretty good. The regular 1030 is pretty good, but you see how it can break down once it gets really hot. You can see where that could be a little bit of a dangerous game.
Oh, so another question about the weights. So what happens if it goes over that 200 or 210? I think is what they tested it at.
Yeah.
So like, does it start getting like 1540?
It starts getting thinner.
It's not like that, yeah, it thins out.
Yeah, you start losing viscosity. So
So,
a 40 will act like a 30, and a 30 will act like a 20, and so on. Once it gets hotter.
So up to the testing temperature, it's 1540 is 40,
That's right.
and then after it gets
After that, now you start losing viscosity, so you start losing film retention. But anyway, here we go. I thought I had this. So, we talk a lot about oil, and we talk about a lot synthetic versus conventional or mineral-based, how they're all essentially mineral-based. Even synthetic oils, use a compound that they pull from regular oil. But synthetic-based stocks or synthetic lubricants are man-made lubricants that have predictable properties, and this is the big deal, predictable properties. They are often derived from petroleum-based products, that's the word I was looking for, and synthetic-based stocks are produced by chemically combining various compounds to produce products with controlled molecular structures. And this is the important thing about synthetics. There's a lot of myths about synthetic oils, but this is the deal about them, is that they have controlled molecular structures. They can actually man-make these compounds. The combining process is tightly controlled since the final product must have adequate viscosity for use as a lubricant. True synthetics can consist of group 4 and 5. That's some chemical stuff that I don't know about. But the main thing to keep in mind here is that I think you guys have probably seen this before, but conventional oil is irregular. The molecules inside of it is irregular. I mean, and you can believe that because, I mean, this stuff is pulled out of the ground and then it's refined, and, so on the molecular level, there's no way to really know, exactly how uniform those molecules are. I mean, we're talking about dead dinosaurs and plants and things, right? So, some places in the world have different structures than others. You hear, sweet crude, and you hear about other types of crude oils and all this because they find them in different places and they have different molecular makeups. And some of them are better used for other things, kerosene or diesel fuel or whatever the case. And then some of them make really good oils. But they refine them down until they make oil out of them. But they still end up with this irregular molecular structure. And you can see if this is your plate, this is your, let's call that, your bearing, and this is your rod. Well, we're talking about very, very, very tight tolerances. And so you can see that the conventional oil will leave gaps there where you don't have proper protection. And obviously this illustration is a little exaggerated, but sometimes, maybe they're not even round. Sometimes the molecules can be, have sharp edges on them or be octagon shaped or whatever. They can leave gaps, they can actually make uneven wear surfaces and that kind of thing. With synthetic oil, it maintains its molecular structure and it's uniform. So you end up with this nice uniform load and this ball bearing effect when it's compressed down into a film. Not only does it keep a nice uniform effect here when it's compressed, but because it can be very, very tightly controlled, it can be used in a wider range of temperatures, like we're talking about just a minute ago. And so you can see right here, typical conventional motor oils, hang around in the 0 to a little over 200 range is kind of their home. That's kind of where they act the best. Anything under and over that would be considered extreme operating conditions. Well, with synthetics, you see we're down here at -60 and we're up here over 400, where it's kind of in its happy place. And it doesn't get into extreme operating ranges until way down here at -80 and way up over there at almost 450 degrees. So you can see here with synthetic motor oil that not only do you have a wider range of temperatures where it's going to remain effective, but you also have a nice uniform base, when you got a film on your bearing surfaces. People will tell you, don't switch back and forth or whatever. That's usually one of the myths that you hear a lot about synthetics. It's not going to hurt you. You could get one oil change with synthetic and one oil change with conventional and the next one with synthetic and the next one with conventional, and it's not going to reduce the life of that engine any more than if you just did, one or the other. However, you're likely not to reap the benefits, and that's the big problem.
I've actually heard of people in the past that do oil change at home or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll do like 4 conventional and 1 synthetic just to kind of give it that little boost.
And like I say, I don't know that I can guarantee he's not hurting it that way, but I don't know if you're picking up any benefit from it. And the reason I say that is because let's say you do a synthetic oil change and everything is nice and happy, you've got nice tight tolerances, you've got good wear patterns there, you've got good operating range with your temperature and everything is cool. And the next one you put in the conventional. Well, now your temperature range has tightened up quite a bit, and now you've got irregular molecules, and so maybe you pick up a little more wear. Maybe you've got a little bit different, the piston to wall clearance or whatever is a little tight, and you end up with a little bit of wear or scuffing or something like that. And then you go back to the synthetic next time. It's not going to repair that scuffing that was there, So I don't think, you're obviously not going to hurt it, but I don't know if you're going to gain anything from it. Whereas with, sticking with the synthetic all the time, there's a lot to be gained. There's a lot to be gained in not only, in protection of the engine, but because it's very, very stable, it doesn't sludge. You don't end up with deposits. You don't end up with varnishing. You don't end up with that kind of thing. And obviously, most of us don't live in this kind of temperature range with our oils, but this falls into our purpose-built theme tonight. So if you're purpose-building a car or a truck or anything like that to operating in extreme temperatures, then obviously you would want to provide it the best protection possible. So I'm not paid by an oil company, but I highly recommend you use synthetics all the time. All right, steering and suspension. I just got a couple on this one. This one is another really, really familiar one, but I've added a few more to this because, again, this is one of those areas where you can set things up to be purpose-built. You can have a purpose in how you set these angles up. So most of us probably have got a good understanding of caster, camber, and toe, but we'll give a little quick primer here. Toe is the angle of the tire in relation to the center line when viewed from the top. So let's say you're looking straight down on the car, like bird's eye view. That would be negative toe. That would be positive toe. You have to, forgive my crude drawings here. I made these, but camber is the inward or outward tilt of when viewed from the front. So let's say you're looking dead on the front of the car and the tire tilts in the cool way or out the bogus way. Yeah, I don't know anybody that drives around positive camber, but I have seen it happen from like failed ball joints and failed components and things. Yeah. Are those old twin I-beam Ford trucks? You ever seen those? And yeah, and they jack them up in the air and the tires go like this. You know. Yeah, that's an unwanted consequence. Yes, sir. And then caster, this is one that kind of gets ignored again. There's always one that kind of gets ignored. But you can see caster is the angle of the steering axis in relation to the center line of the wheel when viewed from the side. So let's say you're looking right on the side of the car. You got the front going that way. This is right to the side. That steering axis can be tilted forward or tilted backward. Tilted forward is bad news. That's you ever got a shopping cart, at Walmart or whatever, and you're pushing along and the front caster's going, that's why they call this caster. That's why they call those casters, because if you look at them, the way that they're angled is not directly in line with the way that they turn. And you end up with that negative caster, and it's wobbly, it's very, very unstable. So most cars are set up with some positive caster to make them more stable at high speeds. You can dial this in to do what you want. You can actually make it return quicker. If you ever turned out of your driveway or whatever it is and you let go of the steering wheel and it returns by itself, caster is what affects that returnability. So, like drag cars and things like that usually got super positive caster. They're laid way back to be real stable going in a straight line. And then, road race cars, autocross cars and things like that will usually make them a little closer to center line to make them react faster but be less stable in a straight line at high speed. So this is another one of those things where you can actually, purpose built for what you want it to do. These are some better illustrations that I found than the ones that I made. But that, again, this is kind of explaining exactly what we just talked about with camber. It's the inward or outward angle of the tire when viewed from the front. Too much inward or outward tilt, also known as negative or positive camber, respectively, indicates improper alignment and will need to be adjusted. Worn bearings, ball joints, and other wheel and suspension parts may contribute to camber misalignment. So again, this is a better illustration, but you guys kind of get what we're talking about here. Take a drink of my juice box here offline. Caster, again, this is just a better illustration. I don't know if my illustration was really kind of getting the point across. But caster angle helps balance steering, stability, and cornering. Specifically, it's the angle of the steering axis when viewed from the side. If you have positive caster, the the steering axis will tilt toward the driver. Negative caster means the steering axis towards the front of the car. So if you're looking at this on the other side of the car, just remember toward the driver is positive. That's the easiest way to remember that. Because I know you're probably going to go out there and jump on the alignment machine after we leave here, but yeah, do it old school style. Toe, again, distinct from camber, toe alignment is to the extent which your tires turn inward or outward when viewed from above. If that's confusing, just stand up and look down at your feet and angle them toward the center of your body, kind of like duck action. When the tires on your car are angled the same way, we call that toe in. Angle your feet outward and you have toe out. Both require adjustment. Now this is the one that usually gets people the most. This is a very, very high wear angle. So if your toe is really out one way or the other, it will wear a tire very, very quickly. And this is also the one that most people complain about as far as pulling, because as you can see, if that tire was towed out and this one were straight, that car is going to pull that way. And if that one is towed in and that one is straight, obviously it's going to pull the other way. So, you want to make sure that that toe is actually set within factory specs, or if you're building a race car or something like that, there's usually some setup guide that will give you a good idea where to go. A little bit of toe in is usually where everybody lands. I don't know anybody that runs toe out on the front. Maybe some autocross cars. They typically run a little bit of toe out on the back.
When we was doing alignments on the big trucks,
Yeah.
the right wheel, we always had it turned out 1/16.
Really?
Yep.
Was that for road crown?
Well, that, and if something happens, it's gonna pull off the road.
Oh, I got you. So if you lose steering for some
Steering
reason.
or something, yeah,
Interesting. I've never heard that.
it's gonna pull itself off, it's gonna pull off the road.
Very cool. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, if that one was towed out a 16th and this one were relatively straight, then it would
I mean,
absolutely.
You're not gonna notice it, and it's not gonna make no big wear difference in the tire.
That was gonna be my next question. Do you notice that that side tire wears funny or anything like that? No? Interesting. Yeah, and again, most people will, most factory specs are a little bit towed in because as you load the car at speed, it's gonna pull everything back and actually straighten this up just a touch. So towed in is stable and it's safe. Again, if you're building an autocross car, a road race car, something like that, there may be a situation where you would tow them out just a little bit to make it turn in real fast. Or like David said, I hadn't heard that before, but that makes a lot of sense. Tow that one out just a little bit, so if something really bad happens, it will just pull itself off to the right. It's kind of cool because a runaway truck going off to the left would not be cool at all. Brakes, again, we're going to touch on this real quick because there are some things here that I've added on to as well. This slide probably looks familiar to you guys, but again, this is one of those areas where you got choices. Brake pad materials. We've talked about these before. In fact, I've got a whole one of these classes just on braking. It's titled Slowing Down, and you guys here have all seen it, but if you guys haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. It's called Slowing Down. It's all brakes. But I use this slide in that class, and the reason I included it in this one, because this is another one of those areas where you have to take this into account, for what purpose this thing is being used. Obviously, your tow rig, your wife's Camry, and your race car all don't need the same brake pads. So we need to kind of take into account what the purpose of this is. We've got organic or NAO. That's kind of taking the place of the old asbestos pads. They don't use those anymore. So this is the next lowest level. The pros to that is it's very cost effective. When I say cost effective, I mean cheap. Yeah, exactly. And cheap is rarely, if ever, the best option. In fact, it's almost always the worst option. But they do have some pros. They're very cheap, they're very quiet, and they don't generate a whole lot of dust in comparison with some of the other options here. The cons, obviously, is that they have very limited thermal range. By that I mean that they will fade very quickly because it's not much more than compressed cardboard and some glue that holds them together. So obviously you're going to get very limited thermal range there, and they wear relatively quickly. They actually wear extremely quickly. And they have a higher tendency to fade, which we just talked about with the thermal range. Obviously, brake fade, not a good idea. Let's see here. Oh, I got a question from online. Let's see here. All right. Sorry about that. Looks like we've got just saying hey. A long hey. But shout out to Herman Coward. He's checking us out tonight, so that's cool. Anyway, so with semi-metallics, this is kind of where, most of us have lived for a long time. The cheapo organic NAOs, you might put those on your work car and, replace them every 10,000 miles or whatever. I don't know. I can't think of any situation where that would be the best option, but if all you got is $18 and you need some brake pads, then I guess that's the best deal for you. But semi-metallics are probably where most of us are going to start. The pros there, they have very, very good performance. And when I say performance, I mean they have very good bite. They are very resistant to fade. They have, a lot of stopping power, very high thermal range, which means they can deal with a lot more heat than the organics can. And they are most resistant to brake fade because they have a very high metallic content. Obviously, the more metal in it, the more heat they can deal with, and that makes them more resistant to fade. There are a few cons, though. That high metal content will eat rotors, which, sacrifices have to be made. If you want something that has a very high coefficient of friction and something that bites really good, then obviously they're going to be hard on the rotors. And again, it's because of that metallic content. You actually end up with more metal-to-metal contact. They're noisier. I don't know, everybody here has probably heard brakes in the morning, they make a bunch of noise, and they make a ton of dust. These are probably the highest dust producers out of all these. So, you got some nice wheels on your car or truck, and you get that black dust on there. If you don't get it off, man, that stuff is real tough to get off. And it can actually be corrosive to some wheels. Raw aluminum, stuff like that can be very, very corrosive. But they do perform excellently. This would be your choice for something that's, seeing track use, seeing autocross use, towing heavy loads, that kind of thing. This is probably where you want to be. Now we get back to your wife's Camry. these right here are what you want, or your everyday driver. The ceramics. Now, just like the name suggests, it's ceramic, just like you would see in like pottery or dishes or whatever. It's the same kind of material. It's ground up into a dust and it's added with a bunch of other materials. They're very, very quiet. They make very little dust and they have a very long lifespan. They wear very slowly. But the cons, they're most expensive. They don't bite well when they're cold, and they don't absorb heat as well as the semi-metallics. And the reason that that's important is the heat absorption, the way that they deal with heat is when you run into brake fade. That's, again, brake fade is when you actually create a gas between the pad material and the rotor material. And so no matter how hard you stand on it, the pad material is actually vaporizing. And so you're trying to push that vapor against the rotor and you're not stopping. Because if there's no contact, there's no friction, and with no friction, there's no stopping. Anybody ever experienced brake fade before, coming down the mountains? Yeah. That is not a good feeling. That's usually where you see it, coming down steep mountains with a heavy load or something like that. I personally experienced it in my car at VIR and ended up in the gravel, sideways, 80 miles an hour. It was, busted the front end all to pieces. It was not good. Brake fade, not fun. But for your everyday driver, like I said, you got a car that you just drive to go get the groceries, go take the kids to school, do that kind of thing. Ceramics are great. They're quiet. They don't make a bunch of dust. They last a long time. And in most of those instances, you're not going to get into a position where brake fade is going to be a problem.
Now, what is says low bite when cold?
Yeah.
Is there a temperature range on that, or?
They do, and every company has their own compounds. Like if you go to like Hawk HPs or something like that, they're going to give you a temperature range. They're going to actually give you a temperature, like 200 to 400 or 600 to 800 or whatever it is. And every manufacturer has their own compound, so it's a little bit different. The ceramics were always going to bite a little less than the semi-metallics when they're cold, but for most part, I don't think the average driver is ever going to notice it. What you probably will notice is that you might get a different pedal feel. So let's say you put these on the wife's minivan and she fires it up cold and takes off down, and the first stop at the end of the driveway she might feel like she has to use a little more pedal. But you get it out 3 or 4 stoplights down the road and the thing feels fine. Most people don't notice it, but yeah, there is a little bit there. They need to get some temperature in them before they work really well. I don't know what that exact temperature is, though. Trying to be honest with you. So again, we're talking about our organic, ceramic, and metallic. This is just a cool graphic that I thought, kind of showed them price range. $1 sign versus 2 versus 3. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of neat. But you see the performance, 1 star, 3 star, 3 star. Noise, the ceramics are very good on noise. Metallics can be very loud. And in wear and tear on brake system, the metallics are harder on the rotors than either of the other two. So you're kind of paying the price. You get the best performance, but you're going to deal with some noise and you're going to deal with some wear and tear. I don't particularly agree with them on this. They gave the ceramics and the metallics the same star rating on performance. Those are not going to perform as well in a hardcore situation, like say towing a heavy trailer, on racetrack use, that kind of thing. Semi-metallics they can't be beat for that. But they do make a bunch of racket, and they do make a bunch of dust. So for your everyday driver, the ceramics are usually the way to go, unless, like I say, you're towing a trailer or something like that, or you live in the mountains. All right, fuel and emission, everybody's favorite term.
Yeah, I got that picture. I was not quite sure what I was looking at.
Octane rating, we've been through this before, so we're not going to spend a lot of time here. I've got to wrap this up in about 10 minutes, and I think we're going to make it. Octane rating, again, if you guys don't know, is a fuel's ability to resist pre-detonation or knock by controlling the speed of the flame front or burn rate. The higher the octane rating, the more resistant to detonation. Things such as compression ratio, ignition timing, temperature, and forced induction determine the necessary octane. I cannot stress this enough. And these guys in here are sick of hearing it, but I can't stress it enough. You can buy the cheapest gas.
Dollar General's making gas now.
Yeah, there you go, Dollar General gas. And it could be 93 octane, and you drive a 97 Camry with a 2.2 in it, or whatever, you're not doing the car any favors. You're much, much better off to buy a quality Tier 1 fuel in the octane that the car requires. And the reason being is because anything that doesn't need the added octane is not using it. In fact, you're actually hurting it because it slows down the burn rate. However, if you're driving a 2011 335i, Elena, I hope you're watching, you have to use a higher octane because now you're dealing with a high compression engine that has forced induction added on to it. So now you end up with a very, very high combustion chamber pressure. And so you need that slower burn rate to prevent detonation. So it's very important to use the octane that you require, and it doesn't matter what brand it is, you need to use Tier 1 fuels, which, right here, top tier fuels. This is Drew's favorite slide. This is Drew's favorite slide, and I cannot stress this enough. But this is actually a new one that actually has some information that I didn't share last time we talked about this, so I thought it was pretty cool. This was a AAA study that I'd found on top tier fuels, and that's a new valve, a top tier gasoline, and non-top tier gasoline after 4,000 miles. That's just 4,000 miles on these valves. That's less than most people's oil change. You know, nowadays oil change is usually $500 to $7,500. So we're talking about in the span of one oil change, how much carbon can build up on a valve. So despite the fact that 2/3 of U.S. drivers believe there is a difference in quality of gasoline sold by different gas stations, a AAA survey revealed that Americans value convenience and price over quality when it comes to selecting a gas station. Who would have thought? Yeah. So yeah, I
If that
thought.
weren't the case, nobody would drive it.
That is a true story. That is a true story. So Americans require, they like price and convenience over quality. Wow. I mean, that's just a revelation. But, but it's interesting that it says 2/3 of drivers believe there is a difference. So if you asked 100 people, they're saying that over 75 of them would say, yes, there is a difference, which I would agree. There is a difference. But that doesn't seem to matter. Because it says, according to their survey, 3/4 of U.S. drivers choose a gas station based on location, 75% based on location, and 73% based on price. So they're more concerned, I guess we as a whole, are more concerned with where the gas station is and how much it costs than what kind of fuel it is. That's a travesty. And that's why I wanted to talk about this again, because I don't want anybody in this room to be included in this 75%. So you guys are all 25%ers right now. Now, don't get me wrong. In my $400 work beater, do I care? No. Although, I do still have to run high-octane fuel because it is supercharged. So I do take that into account. Again, my wife's car, my son's car, my other car, it does matter. Nearly 1/3 of U.S. drivers choose a gas station based on rewards program, which I don't know anybody who does that, but okay, I'll take their word for it. Do you?
Well, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
You want 3 cents off the gallon?
Dude, I don't care, man,
Well,
3
I
cents.
just got 50 cents off a gallon here the other week.
Pretty strong,
Yeah, I don't know. It ain't moving the needle, man, but that's cool.
What?
10
right?
gallons,
Saving you money so you
$5.
So you can buy gas in the future.
yeah, I guess. I mean, it's fine. But 12% of U.S. drivers select gas station based on whether the gasoline contains enhanced detergent packages, so top tier. See, we need to be part of this 12%. All you guys listening out there, all you guys here, you need to be part of the 12%. Nearly half of U.S. drivers do not regularly buy gasoline that contains an enhanced detergent additive. So 47% of the people out there buying gas are not buying Tier 1 fuels. And that's really scary because 10 years ago, that wouldn't have mattered. Now, the average age of the car on the road now is about 12 years. Well, in the last 12 years, that's what, 08 and up? 08 and up, there's a lot of direct injected, high compression, turbocharged vehicles that require this stuff. I mean, you do not want to deal with this carbon on a direct injected car. Believe me, you don't. In fact, I think everybody sitting in this room, your mom's car, direct injected, your wife's car is direct injected. Your Toyota probably is not. My wife's car is. So we end up, just in this room right here, we've got 4 of us that have direct injected, and half of them are turbocharged. Your wife's car is turbocharged, right?
Yeah. We
Yeah.
use Exxon down there. All over.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I
Exxon,
use
BP,
the
Shell.
Exxon
Yep.
Regular gasoline, I ain't putting no premium in that.
That is a turbo car, man. You'd probably be good to do that.
Better not I'm putting Exxon in it.
I mean, it's true. It's better to err on that side. I'll give you that. But yeah, but
Dollar
it,
General regular 87. That's what you want.
yeah, that might be what you want.
That's what you want. You're trying to kill.
But
the
I
car.
thought this was some really neat information. Again, I know I beat the top tier stuff into you guys' head, but I just thought this was some neat numbers that. Shut up. Anyways, let's move on. Tier 1 gasoline. You're going to know it. That's going to be on the test. Don't
Oh,
you
I
worry.
know it. Trust me.
So again, we're talking about purpose built. We're talking about building things to a purpose. Ignition components are one, again, that usually get overlooked. Now, most of us aren't out there changing our distributors, coil packs, or individual coils based on what we're doing, but it is kind of nice to know there are options. We're going to kind of just gloss over that. There's 3 different types of ignitions out there. Distributor, it's got the coil wires and the spark plug wires. You got coil packs, single pack with a whole bunch of wires, and then you got individual coil or COP, coil on plug, and that's got an individual coil for each one. And then Chrysler had to come in and mess up the whole program and use a combination of coil packs and COPs because their Hemis have got 16 plugs, 8 coils, and each coil is a coil and a wire that runs to another cylinder, and coil and a wire. So you end up with 16 plugs, 8 wires, and 8 coils. So yeah, they messed it up, messed up the program for everybody. But that's kind of an outlier. I think there's some Toyotas that use a very similar system with their 4 cylinders. They got one coil and it has a wire, and then another coil and it has a wire. But yeah, those 16 plug Hemis are something else. But anyway, what we want to focus on here is actually spark plugs. And I know we've talked about spark plugs in here again before, but we'll just add a little bit to it like we've been doing. Spark plug materials. Usually you go to the parts store, you want to say, hey, I need some spark plugs for my, 82 Vega, whatever you're driving. And they're going to ask you, you want copper, platinum, or iridium, or they may even say, this is what was OE, and, tell you it was OE, copper, platinum, or iridium. Copper has the best conductivity of all of the 3, which most people would argue with. They're usually the cheapest, they've been around the longest, but copper has a very, very high conductivity electrically. But it's very, very soft, and it decreases its service life. It has a low melting point, and it's a very soft material, so you end up with decreased service life. And in, old cars, changing spark plugs wasn't a huge deal. You could do it every 15 or 20,000 or whatever, and it was not a deal, not a huge problem. Modern cars, I've had some cars where it pays 6 hours to put spark plugs in them. So you're going to bring that car to the shop, pay me $600 to put spark plugs in it. You don't want to do that every 20 or 30,000 miles. And so, that's where we get into these more exotic materials, the platinums and the iridiums. The harder material lasts longer but requires a higher voltage because it's not as conductive. So this is where you get on that coil on plug where they can have a very, very, very high coil energy because one coil only has to fire that cylinder. You're not dealing with a distributor where it has to fire all cylinders and it has to jump the gap between the rotor and the cap and then travel down the wire and then jump the gap across the spark plug, so you lose a lot of energy there. And again, because it's spinning around and it has to fire all the cylinders, you don't get very much time to dwell the coil in between each one. So you'll never get as much energy out of one of these as you do out of an individual coil. And that's why most cars have moved this way. You can get really, really high spark outputs, and so they can use these platinum and iridium plugs to have really long service intervals. Iridium, 6 to 8 times harder than platinum and 25% longer life. This is where you get into those 100,000 mile old spark plug changes. Most cars nowadays will go 100,000 or even more. I mean, I've pulled them out of 150, 160,000 mile cars with original plugs in them. The old copper plugs, you would never got that. That sucker, Alex said, that you'd be lucky. You're lucky to get 20. For race cars and stuff, though, this is the deal. The copper is, because even though it has that low melting point, and even though it is a soft material, something like a race car, the plugs get changed out all the time. So it's a regular service. Some cars, they get changed out every run. Sometimes it's once a season. But these cars aren't getting driven 30 and 40 and 50,000 miles. So they want the best conductivity. They want as much spark energy as they can in that combustion chamber. And so usually you're going to see copper plugs in performance applications. Because again, if you're doing that, it's just a wear item, something that you're going to change. Sometimes that's not an option. You know, if you're building a hot rod modern car, there probably are no copper options. But if there is an option, that's usually what you're using. But this is why they do the things that they do. This is another one of my beautiful drawings here, and I'll get this wrapped up in just a second. Yeah, and again, I'm not an artist here, guys, but I wanted to try and give you an idea of how you can identify what kind of spark plug is in a car. Let's say that you pull one out and you don't know what it is. Maybe there's no markings on it. Maybe the part number doesn't make sense to you or whatever. You can usually tell, unless the thing is completely wrecked, what type of plug it is by just looking at it. So a copper plug will usually have a very large diameter electrode and nothing on the ground strap. It'd just be a metal ground strap with a big old fat electrode. That's typical of a copper spark plug. The platinum plugs, either single or double, you'll usually see a little disc on top of the ground strap, and then you'll see on a double platinum, you'll see a disc on the ground electrode as well. So you'll see a little disc of platinum on both of those. And unless your plug has been totally burned off, you can't see it anymore. Usually you'll see a little disc that's different than the electrode material attached to each one of those, and that's the platinum. Again, single platinum will usually have it right here. Double platinums, you'll end up with it on both of them. That's that term, double platinum. I'm sure you've probably seen that in the parts store or whatever. And then the iridiums, they've even got some more exotic metal that I can't even pronounce. But they typically have a very, very fine wire electrode. You actually take them out and you'll see a little tiny wire in there. Not a big fat surface like a regular spark plug, but they actually have just that little tiny wire there. And that's the iridium in the electrode there. And that's usually a good way to pick out what kind is in there. I hope that makes sense to you guys. But I do have a better picture just in case, if I can get my phone to cooperate here. So here we go. Here's a better picture.
Is this your drawing as well?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on this. But again, I think you can, I showed you my drawing first so I can kind of explain why these look the way that they do. The copper, again, you got the big fat electrode, nothing on the strap. Single iridium, you see that thin wire like we were talking about, and then nothing on the strap. Iridium platinum, you see the little platinum disc on there. Again, double platinum, you can see the disc there and disc there. Single platinum, just a disc on the bottom. And then double iridium, which I have not personally seen one of those in real life, but apparently they do exist. And then push wire ground, you see that with the U channel. NGK is good for that. They have a U channel inside the ground strap. But these are the ones that are most common to see: the iridium, and the platinum, and the copper. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys a little way to kind of identify them if you pulled them out and you weren't sure what to put back. Make sense? And we're going to call it before we get to tires, because it is 7 o'clock and I have quite a few on tires, but we will get to those in another lesson. Does anybody have any more questions? You guys were pretty interactive tonight. I like that. That 2-week break must have helped you guys out.
I didn't know what to do with my life. I mean, I had 2 weeks.
Your life was without purpose, huh?
We didn't interact, we would never shut up.
There is a very good possibility of that. I'm sorry? Ethanol is debatable. Now, modern cars are tuned to use it, and there is some advantages. So ethanol acts like a higher octane fuel because the alcohol burns slower and it burns cooler. So there's an advantage to using it as like a race fuel, like an E85 or something like that, because it can act like like alcohol, like you hear alcohol dragsters and these kind of things. It's the same kind of alcohol. The downsides, obviously, is it doesn't sit well. Like if you store a car, because it is hygroscopic, and it absorbs moisture and it's more prone to corrosion and that kind of thing. An old car that is not tuned to use it, it's not as you're not going to gain anything there because you're actually losing some of that gasoline. There's less power per gallon in the fuel itself. Again, it kind of depends on the tune. If you take an old car and you can ramp the timing way up and you can add a bunch of compression and that kind of thing, and you actually make more power with the ethanol than you would with straight gasoline. But with no other changes, you actually lose power because it takes more of it to make the same amount of power. Does that make sense? If you wanted to make, I don't know, let's say 400 horsepower, it would take more physical ethanol than it would gasoline to make that power. And so, the injectors would have to be bigger, all the fuel lines and everything, all that would have to be bigger because you need more of it to make the same amount of power. But there is a lot of advantages. It runs real cool, and it does act like a higher octane. It kind of prevents detonation a little bit.
On older vehicles, what would, instead of running, synthetic oils or whatever, what would be a good alternative additive or something?
And my answer, man, I'm a fan of Lucas. I love that stuff. I put it in everything. That stuff is, I went to visit them when I worked for O'Reilly, when we had these conventions, and we got to visit the vendors and talk to them about their product and stuff. And I was a believer before then, but actually getting to see the way it's made and, see how it sticks to the metal, and it's actually got molecular bonding agents in it that make it bond to metal and that kind of thing. There's been a bunch of them out on the market. That Z-Max stuff is another one that advertises that. AMSOIL is another one that advertises that. I think any of those, I don't think you could go wrong, I'll be honest. And you bring up a good point. In an older vehicle, the clearances are a lot looser. But I do think you would be better off using a heavier synthetic than a lighter conventional with an additive. So, let's say you had a vehicle that had 250,000 miles on it, and it's been around for a long time. Maybe the clearances aren't as tight as they used to be. Instead of using, say, a 1030 plus an additive, I think maybe a 2050 full synthetic would probably be a better alternative, because you'll get that protection that the synthetic would offer, but you also get that temperature stability that the synthetic offers. So I do think in that case you're probably better going with a heavier synthetic than an additive. But I'm a huge fan of Lucas. I use it in everything. So I've only blown up a few motors, but but none of it was oil related. Anybody else? Anybody online? No? All right, cool. Well, guys, I appreciate it. I tell you what, before we get done here, I am going to slide back to this one, just because.
Stop on the tier 1 gas.
Yeah, stop on the tier 1. Tier 1 fuels. Tier 1
Let's
fuels.
just talk about this for another minute, why not? I don't know why they don't make spark plugs out of gold, because gold is more conductive than copper. I see no drawbacks to making spark plugs out of gold.
It's super, super soft. That's the only reason.
Forget that.
And gold is used in motorsports a lot for its thermal properties. For the same reason they use it on space shuttles, rockets and that kind of thing. You see a lot of gold because it's very, very thermal reflective, and they can make it very, very thin and very, very light. So it's actually the most thermal reflective material that there is. So you see all that gold foil on the space shuttle and stuff. They use that in motorsports a lot. Formula One cars.
There's, very real golden cars over in Dubai. It's definitely actual.
Yeah. And like I said, if you open the hood on like a Pagani or something like that, and you see the gold around the intake tubing, or you see gold heat shields and stuff, it's so that it can be very, very heat reflective, but very, very light. So there is a place for gold in automobiles. I stopped back here at our cars program. Don't forget, guys, next Sunday, the 8th, 2 o'clock, come on out. I want to see all you guys out here. I don't care what you bring. Bring a truck, motorcycle, import, muscle car, sports car, whatever you got, and come in and at least hang out with us. And like I said, no entry. We'll be selling food, to go toward our cars program, and we'll have some raffles and things if you want to get involved. But even if you don't want to get involved in any of that, just come out and hang out with us. All right. With that being said, let's pray, guys. Father, thank you for this time that we get to spend together. Father, we are thankful for the protection that you have shown each and every one of us throughout these couple of weeks. And Father, we pray that you would continue to do so. Please be with each and every family and household represented here and those that are watching this online. And Father, we pray that you would bless this event that we've got, and pray that we would do this in the best representation that we could for you and your Son, Jesus Christ. We do this in his name. Amen. And amen. All right, guys, we'll see you next time, and hopefully to see all you guys out here next week. Thank you.